have to say there's a lot of things that I've learnt in the last few weeks about the commercial relationship between Australia and South Africa that have certainly taken me by surprise, so I'd like to share some of that with you. In the 2018 Australian Business Survey, Australian businesses ranked South Africa as a top 20 international market. And if you look at the trade investment statistics, by any measure, it's a very significant bilateral commercial relationship. Australia is the largest investor in South Africa's mining sector, so that's not a surprise. It's the foundation for the business relationship, but we're also the 7th largest investor in South Africa, foreign investor. And the investment relationship is very significant. It's doubled since 2012, and foreign direct investment between our two countries has gone up tenfold in that time. And it's very balanced, it's in both directions, and I think that's what's particularly surprising. So people are surprised to learn that it's on par with, if not greater than, our investment relationship with many of our Asian partners. But I think it's worth putting out these factoids. Did you know that Australia invests more in South Africa than we do in Korea, in Thailand, and in the Philippines? And did you know that South Africa invests more in Australia, that's FDI, than Indonesia and India, or the UAE? So for some reason, I think I say this to, everyone is surprised, from colleagues to officials to business people to ministers, both in South Africa and Australia. So clearly we have a role to do to promote the relationship. And I think the trade relationship is equally significant. Our merchandise trade with South Africa is about a third of our total merchandise trade with Africa, so very significant. And it's evenly balanced, it's very complementary. So we're exporting commodities principally to South Africa, coal and aluminium. And South Africa its principal export to Australia, did you know, is motor vehicles. And that points to the fact that South Africa is the most industrialised economy in Africa. It's got a very strong manufacturing base. It's got a world-class financial system, deep capital markets, a legal system with rule of law. It's very, very well respected. And these are all very important factors for facilitating trade and investment. But mining is obviously the foundation for it, but it's only one part of the story. It's quite a diversified trade and investment relationship, particularly in the services side. So you have Australian companies like Macquarie Bank who've got offices there, Telstra. We have obviously direct flights that's been mentioned between Sydney, Perth and Johannesburg. I think it's the only direct daily flights from Australia to Africa. And that facilitates tourism, it facilitates people-to-people links, and obviously business. So we've seen in tourism, we've got Flight Centre that's headquartered, that has an office there. We have Intrepid Travel. So lots of, very diversified beyond mining. There's also very strong science and technology cooperation between Australia and South Africa, and the flagship initiative for that is the Square Kilometre Array, which is being co-hosted by Australia in Western Australia and South Africa in the Western Cape, and together, when that comes on stream, it will be the world's largest radio telescope. This week I was very surprised to learn that on the agribusiness side there's very good cooperation. We think of South Africa as a competitor in the agriculture space, but I was also surprised to learn that South Africa is the 10th largest investor in Australian agricultural land. And we have similarities when it comes to climate, soil, seasonal, environmental factors. And I learned this week there was a launch of a commercialisation agreement in Perth. It was launched, a signing ceremony, to commercialise the growing of a plant that's indigenous to South Africa called Lebekia, which grows in very arid, acidic, sandy soil types and can be used as a highly nutritious, high-quality feed for sheep. So it's going to be a win-win venture for Australia and South Africa. It comes after 10 years of scientific research and development collaboration between Murdoch University and researchers from South Africa's Western Cape. And Australia will benefit obviously with the commercialisation of the product here, but South Africa will benefit through royalties and usage agreements. So that's a very strong example of collaboration. As part of my pre-posting consultations, I went to Geelong in south of Melbourne, because that's where Cotton On is headquartered. I assume you all know about Cotton On, especially those of you who've got teenage daughters. You'll all know who Cotton On is. Did you know that Cotton On has 170 stores in South Africa? And their biggest store in the world is in South Africa, in the iconic Mall of Africa. And when I went to Cotton On, and they've got a very impressive operations in Geelong, it's 100% Australian-owned company. I said to them, "Why did you go into South Africa?" And they said, "Oh, well, we had a South African who came to work for us, and he had business experience in South Africa. He had a failed experience, but through his lessons learned, he convinced us how to go in and do it differently and to succeed, and they have." So I think that also points to the fact that those diaspora links are very critical in terms of people who have knowledge and can be the first movers. And South Africa, did you know that South Africans are the 8th largest migrant group in Australia? So, and of course in Perth, you see here South African, you just have to go to the rugby and you'll see a lot of South African Australians. One thing I'd like to see is an outcome of today's event, and I think it's good to try and have an outcome. As a result of this growing trade and investment ties between Australia and South Africa and growing diversity beyond mining, in 2014 the Australian Business Chamber in Southern Africa was established. It's headquartered out of Johannesburg. It's a very active chamber, but what I'd like to see is that it establishes a formal link, Duncan, with the Australia-Africa Business Council. And I think that forming those business-to-business links will really help to cement ties and to promote and strengthen the already very healthy and positive commercial relationship between Australia and South Africa. Thank you.